Good morning and welcome back to Cursed Keepsakes, read by Catherine Kim, your very own reading author. It is a cold, rainy day, spring day here in Tokyo, but warm weather is coming and I've got hopes for it. They've started selling potted flowers at the grocery store, so you know it's coming. Um, Naturally, as soon as I start recording, the doorbell rings. Um, where was I? Yes. So we are here to read what are we on? Chapter 6 of Cursed Keepsakes, and so I'll just go ahead and get to it. Chapter 6. Jake, seriously, he's not going to attack you. Callum's voice drifted to Niko from behind a mountain of boxes. The warehouse itself was large, but seemed both larger and more packed thanks to a number of industrial shelving units, stretching in rows down the length of the building. It felt a little like the warehouse they hid the Ark of the Covenant in at the end of that ridiculous archaeologist movie. Niko's new acquisitions were piled in the front, still awaiting sorting and final storage. But he's got to be pissed, Cal. I can't blame him, a new voice said. We threw a brick through his shop window. Yeah, probably. But he's been pretty chill so far. Niko could almost hear the shrug that must have accompanied the statement. Jake sighed. I can't even look at him, you know? Look, if you want to apologize, I'm pretty sure he'll be okay about it. I don't, know the guy, but he seems pretty chill. He's not the sort of guy to hit people. I just keep seeing that photo that Wendy showed us. The hunters gloating over all those bodies. Yeah. A long silence followed. It seemed to be the end of the conversation. Niko waited a moment to be sure he wouldn't startle them, then deliberately scuffed his foot on his next step. Well, this is quite a pile, isn't it? He asked, coming around the corner of the stack of boxes. He eyed the setup behind the two young elves. Furniture sat there, not stacked, but stuffed into one aisle of the small warehouse as best they could manage. Smaller tables and pictures and a few boxes that weren't fully closed at the top, allowing knickknacks to peek out, were piled on top of sofas and chairs and the large wooden dining table. Yeah, everything's here except the stuff you took yesterday, Callum said. Niko nodded, then looked at the pair. Callum stood, chin raised above the ratty scarf, as if daring Niko to comment. Jake, however, stared at the floor near the sofa, his shoulders pulled in. He wasn't quite hunched in on himself, but he looked far from comfortable. These were the would-be vampire hunters that had harassed him? Good heavens. With an internal sigh and a prayer to any deity that was willing to listen, Niko turned his attention to the field aisle again. Do we have any way of telling the enchanted items from the mundane ones? Should I call in a witch to look over everything, do you suppose? He asked. Wendy would know, but she's still dealing with that nutcase from the other day, Callum said. I can tell them apart. Can't tell you what they're supposed to do or anything, though. Well, that's definitely a step in the right direction. If you can do that, I can take some of the safe items to my shop, and we can clear some space. Niko grimaced, trying to imagine that sofa in his store. Or perhaps find some place to donate them. Not fancy enough for you? Callum asked. Jake nudged him and made a face that Niko supposed was meant to be a reprimand. Some of the things here do not fit the aesthetic that my clients come to look for, no. They are fine pieces, to be sure, but they do not suit my shop. What about the things she sold off to the humans? Callum asked. I suppose I should give the list that Ms. Cartland gave me to Wendy. She would be best suited for handling this. I just said Wendy's still dealing with that entitled klutz. Alec isn't supposed to be back until this weekend either, so don't think you can dump it on him. Well, what am I supposed to do about it? Niko spluttered. I'm just a shopkeeper. My job is to buy old things and then sell them on to other people, not go herring off after misplaced bric-a-brac. Guess it's up to us, Jake, Callum scoffed, turning to his friend. We'll get that shit back one way or another. Well, that seemed like a horrible idea. Niko was alarmingly aware of what these boys could get up to when left to their own devices. He was still finding tiny shards of glass kicked under shelves or nudged under the edge of the carpet from the display window these thugs smashed this past spring. Oh, yes, Niko couldn't seem to stop the words from tumbling out of his mouth. Go throw some bricks through some humans' windows. Threaten them with impaling or what have you, steal things back. That will go over well. I'm sure that the human authorities will take the property destruction and theft of the enchanted objects very well indeed. Jake hissed a breath in, but Callum turned on him. At least we are trying to keep the community safe. he yelled. Sure, we made a mistake. I'll own that shit. But at least we're out there trying to look out for the whole community, not just ourselves. It's not about fucking profit for us, or pretty shit in a window or whatever. Niko flinched. Neither you nor I have any authority to do that. He tried to keep his voice steady under the attack. It is not selfish to admit that you are not equipped to perform a task. I did as Wendy asked and arranged for the estate to be sorted through by community members who know what they are looking at rather than by innocent humans. That was my part and I have done it. Jake cut in. We could at least start sorting things out, right? If Wendy's too busy to look, we're here and we can do that much. I was supposed to be cleaning the warehouse anyway this week. Callum's shoulders slumped. Yeah, Jake, let's get to sorting. The leech can hand over the sales info to Wendy, and she can find someone who gives a shit to help us track it all down. I care, thank you very much, Niko said, but I also know my limitations. You would not ask an actuary to lead an expedition to Everest. Why do you expect me to do this? Callum shot him a glare, but didn't answer. Instead, he started moving things, carefully selecting items by some rubric that Niko didn't see, presumably the ones that felt enchanted to him. He handed them off to Jake, who put them carefully on a cleared-off shelf in another aisle. Niko was about to speak up when his phone rang. Hello? Oh, Niko, it's Wendy. How are you? Wendy sounded exhausted. I'm well. We've emptied the house, and your young apprentices are starting to sort the enchanted items away from the mundane ones. Niko watched Callum hand a box to Jake, who didn't even look as he carried it to the shelf. I am afraid that the books will take considerable time, however. The whole library was enchanted to look like fiction or mundane reference books, so we will likely need to look through each one individually. Oh dear, she said with a sigh. Actually, I think I figured out the mechanic of that glamour, Jake spoke up. It feels a lot like the one my mom used to hide her balcony garden when I was a kid. She didn't always grow things that humans would have understood. She was half dryad. He shrugged at the end like he wished to excuse his mother for her minor infraction. That's excellent news, thank you, Niko said with a nod in Jake's direction. Jake's smile bloomed at the faint praise. It seems that you shall have a good start on the library after all, Wendy. Wendy sighed, seemingly from her very soul. That's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. The glamour? No, the whole mess. I just don't think I can get away from this guy before Alec gets back. Might be longer. He's being very... She sighed again, clearly trying to choose her words. He and his situation both demand a lot of energy. Turns out his mother was stupidly wealthy, and he's doing his best, but... And poor thing, on top of the grief, her family is being... And I just can't... even after my uncle and all that, it's hard to believe that people can be so... She took a deep breath and blew it out noisily. And he's not reacting well, which I can totally sympathize with, but it's not helping in the least. And then he has an estranged sister, and I'm trying to be polite to everyone involved, but... I see. Niko didn't really, but then he wasn't a guardian of an entire non-human community. He was in charge of his shop, and that was quite enough for him, thank you. I was hoping, since you're such a reliable person, and you're so smart and good at research and all, I thought maybe... I hoped anyway. Could you keep working on this estate sale disaster? Niko blinked. You mean it's sorting the enchanted things? And if you could track down any of the ones that have wandered off, that would be phenomenal. I don't know how I can repay you for all this mess. Niko felt his shoulders droop. Yes. Okay, I shall try to do what I can. Thank you so much. I really do owe you for this, Wendy gushed. Not at all. It's the least I can do, Niko said. I'm not sure how well I shall do at this task. I feel like a fish in a tree. Wendy laughed. That's pretty much how I feel all the time. I know this is way out of your comfort zone. Truly, I appreciate your help more than I can tell you. Very well. I shall do my best not to disappoint you, Niko said. They spoke a little longer, discussing details of what to do with the items that had enchantments. Wendy said she would arrange for a witch friend of hers to come and help them. This friend would also take a look at the books to think of what to do with them as well. When they had a plan in place, Niko hung up and closed his eyes against the whole mess. How did he end up here? All he wanted was to stay in his nice warm shop and not talk to many people. He had enough customers that he could keep his shop and his small apartment and feed his cat, but not so many people came in that he had to dig into his reserves of energy to interact with them. And that's all he needed out of his life. His cat, his books, and just enough shop traffic to keep it all together. And now he had spent all his savings and had to go out and handle people and convince them to sell back what they had taken from the home of a dead enchanter. "What's got you looking like you ate lemons?" Callum's voice interrupted his self-pity. "Wendy is fully engaged with her current problem and has asked me to continue sorting out this mess." Callum's grin was triumphant and a little mean. "Well, looks like you're off to climb Mount Everest then, huh?" "It certainly feels that way, yes," Niko agreed, feeling the defeat crumple his shoulders further. "I am not well suited to this task, and honestly do not expect success." "Well, suck it up, Buttercup. Where's that list the agent lady gave you?" Niko sighed and pulled it up on his phone. "Well, looks like Niko is up a creek and he's got to figure it out. It is really coming down out there. I am glad I remembered to make sure the kid took an umbrella to school with him this morning, because wow. I hope you all are staying warm and dry and comfortable. And I will see you next week with Chapter 7. Bye-bye.